Hello, everyone, and welcome to Save Money, Save Energy, series number 3 with the Building Energy Resource Hub in partnership with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program. My name is Katie Kaluzny. I'm the Deputy Director at Illinois Green Alliance. We are the organization that hosts the Building Energy Resource Hub. We're really excited to be putting on this series in coordination with ComEd and excited to jump in today. But before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program, a little bit about the hub, and then turn it over to our speaker. So today we'll have with us Brian Keller, who's an outreach service provider for the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program. He's going to share how the Energy Efficiency Program can help overcome unique barriers to energy efficiency projects by multi-tenant building managers, provide resources and guidance to ensure that both building owners as well as tenants benefit from investments in energy efficiency. He's going to talk about some of the programs that are available for you at your buildings and how you can take advantage of those. A little bit about the hub. The hub is serving as a clearinghouse for building retrofits, energy efficiency, and decarbonization resources, and we're designed for commercial and multifamily building industry. We are creating opportunities and resources for multifamily and commercial building owners, developers, operators, and building managers and contractors, municipal and community partners to assist with the planning, financing, and implementing of building retrofits in Illinois. But we cannot do this alone. We do this with a lot of partners. This is a project, as I mentioned, that's hosted by the Illinois Green Alliance, but in partnership with Elevate, the Illinois Climate Bank, ComEd, and the City of Chicago, and is supported by funding from the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy under the Building Technologies Office, along with generous support and funding from ComEd and Builders Initiative. We also have industry partnerships like with AIA Chicago, BOMA Chicago, CDAC, and a number of other partners, municipal, industry, and communities. In addition to that, we are part of a national network called the Building Performance Partnership. The Building Performance Partnership is made up of similar hubs across the country, working in different cities and geographic regions to provide retrofit resources as well. So we learn from each other, we can share each other's resources, and then in turn get them to folks in the Illinois network. The hub specifically working to grow capacity for commercial and multifamily building retrofits by guiding building owners and operators on energy efficiency options, like we'll be doing today, increasing contractor knowledge to understand energy efficiency and demand, and to create financial resources for retrofit projects of all types and size, and make sure that everyone working on those buildings is aware of those different resources. And that is why we have a webinar series again today with ComEd, where we're going to be talking about the available businesses resources that ComEd has to offer. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian Keller, who's going to walk us through his agenda, what he's going to cover today. We'll have time for questions and answers later in the session. So please put your questions in the chat for Brian and I as we go along. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to dive into our third webinar of our series. Our agenda today is just a general overview of the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program and a few key offerings that will help not only save energy and help you take advantage of all the incentives out there, but specifically too, there are offerings that have not been covered in our previous two webinars of the series. We can jump to the next slide. So this is a fun slide for me. So one, it's good to start off with this perspective. So we'll talk about saving money and your energy bills and how you can take advantage of incentives through ComEd's offerings. But ultimately, this is our end goal. This is what we're all doing it for, and hopefully this is what kind of can help motivate us and help us feel accomplished as all the work that's been completed. So throughout the lifespan of the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program, which dates all the way back to 2008, there have been over $9 billion saved on customer bills, nearly $2 million in incentives provided, and then ultimately that saves 82 megawatt hours. So that's just big numbers for big energy savings. And then also kind of what is the environmental impact there. So 70 billion pounds of carbon dioxide reduced. So I could spend all day just kind of going through all the fine details of all these accomplishments, but those were the major highlights I wanted to touch on. So always good to provide that perspective and remind ourselves of the end goal and kind of what is driving all of these different incentives and motivations for energy savings. Next slide, please. A very common question that I get is, where do these funds come from? Where do these incentive dollars come from? And one of my favorite answers to give is all of us. So anyone and everyone who is a ComEd customer. So if you own a home, rent an apartment, travel to a business, own a business, within the ComEd service territory, on your ComEd bills every month, there is a line item near the bottom that says energy efficiency programs. And we all pay a little bit each month based off of our based off of our energy usage. And all of that money goes into a big pot. Then it gets redistributed out into administering these programs and then also, providing these incentives. So that's, once again, just kind of pairing that back with all the accomplishments throughout this program, $9 billion in energy costs saved and nearly 70 billion pounds of carbon emissions reduced. So every time we pay our bill, just remember that we're adding to that carbon emissions reduced number as well. And then we can move on to our next slide. So I'd like to start out too with some clean energy solutions. So, obviously a bulk of our presentation today is going to be talking about energy efficiency, but energy efficiency really is just one component of many throughout the, ComEd offering portfolio. So, I can easily say that ComEd is a national leader when it comes to offering comprehensive demand side management solutions to customers and making it a positive customer experience the priority. As we see here, ComEd offers much more than just energy efficiency, everything from demand response and dynamic pricing all the way to solar and EV and beneficial electrification programs, which will be covered later on in slides in this presentation. So don't sleep on these solutions. Please reach out to learn more. Next slide, please. So yes, kind of expanding upon that one component of energy efficiency, there's also kind of a growing branches off that tree into more specific offerings through our energy efficiency program. So my favorite thing to say is there's not only an offering for everybody, but multiple offerings for everybody. So there's a lot to take advantage of, which on one hand is great benefit. There's a lot to dive into and make sure that your facilities are as efficient and optimized. But at the same time, it could also get a little confusing and be a little intimidating. So that's where we come in to kind of help break things down and take things step by step. So it's a great way to start near facility assessments, which is a free service that provides a whole building walkthrough to identify energy saving opportunities. We have our traditional incentives that help offer a financial benefit to reduce the cost of an energy efficiency project. We'll be diving more into these specifics with our standard and custom offerings in future slides. We have our instant discount offering that is a point of sale discount on lighting, new rooftop units, commercial kitchen equipment, and electric fork truck equipment. More details to come later on in the presentation. And then lastly, our optimization offerings. That includes retro commissioning, industrial systems, and strategic energy management. So retro commissioning and strategic energy management were touched on our previous webinar. So if you missed that, be sure to go back to the recording to learn more. And then also we'll be going into more details on industrial systems later on in the presentation. So yeah, next slide, please. So our standard offering. So standard offering is easily one of the more commonly used offering, so it wouldn't shock me at all if many of you are already familiar with it. Standard offering provides incentives on a per unit or per fixture basis. It's also commonly referred to as a prescriptive offering too, if you've heard that terminology before. So most projects do require a pre-application, so it's important to one, connect with outreach service providers like myself to make sure that you're early in the process and you haven't started purchasing equipment or move forward with the actual project yet. And just to make sure that that pre-application process gets taken care of, that will then pre-approve your incentive amount and then reserve that for you. So then as you're going through the project, that money is set aside and it is for you when your project is all done. Some common measures with the standard incentives include lighting upgrades, HVAC upgrades like variable speed drives, and also building automation system upgrades, and expanding that even more into energy management systems. There's also an additional incentive of 10% if you install equipment that is at least 50% manufactured or assembled in Illinois. So that's our Made in Illinois promotion. So keep an eye on that as you're choosing your equipment. Next slide, please. So networked lighting control. So upgrading the lighting you're building to LEDs is one of the easier upgrades. And let's face it, many of us have already done this. So some next steps to push that a little bit further and save even more energy would be to install some more in-depth detailed control systems. So these controls include occupancy sensors. So if somebody leaves a room and forgets to turn the light off after a certain amount of time, they'll turn themselves off. Zone controls, which can be helpful if maybe there is a intermittent flow of occupancy within some of your tenant spaces. A remote hybrid working situation, so that if only smaller portions of an area are occupied, then other portions that are unoccupied, they can have those lights be on their own zone and can be controlled, be off when no one's around. And then also daylight sensors. So if you've got big wonderful windows and take advantage of natural light, those daylight sensors will recognize that and either keep the lights off or at least dim them very low. And as the day progresses and that natural light is reduced, those lights will slowly come on based off of that. So lots of different options to further improve your efficiency, even if you already have LEDs installed. Next slide. Heating and cooling improvements. It's easy to think about LED lighting as that low-hanging fruit, and for it absolutely is. But don't forget there are some low-hanging fruit type projects on the HVAC side as well, on heating and cooling. Variable speed drives are definitely one of those. Installing those on any pumps or motors can be a lower initial cost project with a very nice incentive attached to it, which then makes it a very quick payback. You can also focus on increasing occupant comfort and reducing operating costs by tuning up or replacing rooftop units, and also replacing existing chillers with a more high efficiency unit. Next slide. So here we have our energy management solutions as well. So improving your energy management system, one, by reviewing system settings periodically. There's a lot more change that can happen in your building. So making sure that there's a periodic check to make sure that all of your settings are accurate and fully serving your building's needs. You can also experience additional energy savings through other measures like fine-tuning your scheduling, an optimal start-stop of your air handling systems, a reset of your air supply temperatures, and reset of your chilled water temperatures as well. So keeping, all of those finer details in mind, definitely are ways where, some simple adjustments can definitely have a big impact and big savings. We also have incentives for programmable thermostats and wireless pneumatic thermostats. So keep those in mind, and feel free to ask questions near the end if you want to learn more about those. Next slide, please. So now that we've covered all of the standard offering and incentives, I want to touch on our custom offering as well. So an easy way to think about, it's not the most accurate, but an easy way to kind of think about custom is if it doesn't either have a listed incentive, on the standard side, or if it doesn't fit quite perfectly in standard, then look to custom. And custom is exactly how it sounds. We customize an incentive for your complex, unique projects. So yeah, there's no project too big or small for the custom offering. And if we can prove energy savings, then we can design an incentive around that. So another thing to think about too when you're going through a list of future upgrades at your buildings. So some examples of projects that are eligible to receive custom incentives. So installing regenerative drives to efficiently power your building's elevator banks, that's a custom project. And then also just other operational changes for optimum energy use in your building savings, in your building space, excuse me. Those are often fall into some custom. So there are a few specific measures listed here that can be found on your standard incentive side, but at the same time, with some unique circumstances, better fall into custom, and that's any type of specialty or new construction lighting. If you have a variable frequency drive that is being installed to a motor or a pump that's greater than 200 horsepower, that also falls into custom. So some specific examples there, just to kind of provide a full scope there. Also want to mention down here at the bottom, there is a 15% additional incentive for any custom projects that are being completed in select communities. So if there's any additional questions regarding select communities and the eligibility there, we can definitely talk about that near the end, or even have a more one-on-one conversation regarding that as well. Next slide, please. So here we also have our small business offering. So a lot of times, work hand in hand with the larger buildings, but you'd be surprised as to how many businesses out there also qualify, are considered small business. So kind of the qualification there is that there is a less than 400 kW peak demand. So I know many of you probably are thinking yourselves, you don't know that information quite off the top of your head. So one, if you're thinking, hey, is the building that I run or that I'm associated with small business or larger business that falls into standard and custom? How do I figure that out? One, it is possible to find that information on your ComEd bill or through the logging into your ComEd account online. But also feel free to reach out to your outreach service provider or your LCS manager to kind of figure that out too. We can look it up on our end and have a quick answer for you on whether or not which side of that peak demand your building qualifies under. Also, the small business program uses a closed network of over 77 professionals. So those are our energy efficiency service providers. So if your building does qualify for the small business offering, there is a closed network or specific energy efficiency service providers that must be used to move forward with that project. Whereas in standard and custom, there are also a network of EESPs that can be used, but you can also use either in-house staff or a different mechanical contractor if you wish. But with small business specifically, it's one of the professionals within that network. The small business offering is designed to have higher incentives than other offerings. So those incentives, typically cover anywhere from 50 to 75% of the project cost. There is also a small business energy assessment available, and that assessment will look at and assess your indoor and outdoor lighting, any refrigeration, heating and cooling systems, compressed air, and other weatherization that you can do maybe around your windows or doors or things like that. We can jump to our next slide. So there are some additional project incentive promotions going on with small business offering. There's the 50% for all additional incentive, and that's exactly how it sounds, a 50% additional incentive for any and all small business projects that are new projects that are submitted this year before October 31st, and that their final application is submitted before the end of the year, December 13th. So, a quick turnaround project, but if it's something that can fit that time frame, then there's a 50% bonus for that, or excuse me, additional incentive. And also a summer savings campaign. So, any pre-application that gets submitted before September 22nd, and then a final application getting submitted before December 13th. There's also some additional savings there. That percentage does vary depending on the project, but there's more money is always better. Next slide, please. So just kind of going through the small business process, there are some similarities to other offering processes, but just to kind of break it down, it's always great to start with an assessment. Even if you have a project in mind, an assessment can often identify other projects that you can then plan for the future. Allowing the access to all areas of your facility for that assessment to make sure it's covering everything and getting a chance of looking at all the equipment. You can then review any recommended equipment upgrades and see what available incentives are being offered. And then you can then use that to kind of set goals and kind of use that maybe as a roadmap for future projects. There is a pre-application along with small business as well, and then completing the project and submitting final approval once the project is done, and then the incentive comes after that. Next slide, please. So here we have our instant discount offering. So I mentioned that earlier in our presentation. So instant discounts is a zero paperwork offering in which you can work with registered distributors within the program that will provide that incentive at the point of purchase. So an easy example I use, and bear with me, these are just numbers I'm making up off the top of my head. If a certain light bulb is cost $10, you'll pay, we'll say $8 for that, and then that $2 difference, that's that instant discount. And then so you just receive that lower price right at the point of sale, and you don't need to worry about any paperwork or pre-approval or post-approval, final approval, anything like that. So some of the equipment out there that qualifies and has instant discounts associated with them are any type of screw-in or linear or pin-based LEDs, outdoor LED wall pack fixtures, electric fork truck equipment, and rooftop units. So if you're looking at any of those types of projects, be sure to reach out to your outreach service provider to kind of learn more and get directly set up through instant discounts if that is the path you want to look into. Next slide, please. All right, industrial systems. So for any facilities out there that are more on the industrial or manufacturing side, there is a specific offering for that. here with industrial systems, it's one of our optimization offerings, like we talked about earlier, and provides a fully funded study of a facility's industrial equipment. This study provides a report with energy saving measures, estimated energy savings, for moving forward with those measures, and the incentives and project payback associated with those. The incentives offered through industrial systems is an 18 cents per kilowatt hour saved, but there is also additional 15% incentive offered for projects completed in select communities. In order to have an industrial system study done at your facility, you do have to work with one of the highly qualified ComEd energy efficiency service providers. So yes, there are specific companies out there that are have been approved and vetted through the EESP network. So working with one of those, they have the know-how and the equipment to do a full comprehensive study of all of your industrial systems. Next slide. So a component of the industrial systems offering is the Fix It Now program, which repairs compressed air links at your facilities at no cost to you. So compressed air systems often have leaks in them. It's just part of the wear and tear of using your compressed air systems. So making sure that you are consistently auditing those systems and finding any leaks and making sure those get fixed promptly is a great way to save energy. So it also improves the system performance and reliability, but does have a major impact on your energy bill as well. Next slide. All right, we have our new construction offering also. So with new construction, it's exactly how it sounds, in the sense that it provides technical assistance for either new construction, so ground up building, or adding an addition or expansion onto an existing building, and also major renovation. So I'll get into a little bit more detail on what we define as major renovation a little bit further along in this slide. So keep that in mind. But for projects to qualify, they must be engaged during the design phase, the project needs to be in the design phase and also needs to be prior to submitting for any permits. So that's kind of a good point in time to think about in terms of where is it in the design phase? If you have not submitted for any permits yet, then you're still in the right timeline to qualify for new construction incentives. The project must also be over 5,000 square feet. The design must include certain areas that exceed current Illinois Energy Conservation Code requirements. So that's kind of where the energy savings and where the incentive comes from. Is anything that's above and beyond code will be eligible for incentives. The building must be commercial. So there are other new construction offerings for residential as well, but that's a whole separate program, a whole separate team. So for this one specifically, it is just commercial buildings. And then to qualify for these incentives through kind of that major renovation side, it'll need to be a full redesign of at least two primary building systems, and we define those building systems as lighting, the primary heating and cooling, the building envelope, and also any qualified refrigeration. So if you're thinking to yourself, hey, there's a big renovation of this facility, if you're adding whole new lighting and adding whole new heating and cooling equipment, then those are two of those four. So then you can pursue the new construction incentives, or maybe you're doing new lighting and you're beefing up the insulation on the walls and the roof. That would be lighting and building envelope. So keep those things in mind as you're running into any maybe major renovation projects. And then we'll bump to our next slide. So yes, we will cover quickly here just to wrap up some other clean energy solution offerings. So next slide, please. So here we have our kind of beneficial electrification. So there are also some clean energy solutions through beneficial electrification. Rebates are offered for purchasing fleet vehicle EVs and installing charging infrastructure at your businesses. There are tons of resources with additional information that are all provided in these links on this slide. So as you receive these slides later on, you can then click through these resources and learn more. Next slide, please. And then here we have some solar incentives and tools as well. So ComEd provides resources for learning more on how solar can benefit your building. You can learn more about federal and state incentives for solar by visiting comed.com/solar. And you can also talk to your LCS manager to learn more and make sure you're getting connected with the Green Power Connection team to make sure that any solar additions to your buildings go smoothly and you know uh, happen through the proper process. There are some additional information links here that provide additional information here as well. So I encourage you to click through these links and kind of read through and learn more there. Next slide. Well, that wraps it up for me today. Thank you so much for your participation and for listening. Once again, just more and more links for you to skim through and find additional information here on this slide. So don't hesitate to kind of scroll through these. And then here's my contact information as well. You can reach out to me with any additional questions, or if you want to have more of a one-on-one conversation to dive into additional detail. And I believe next we have some time for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. This was great information, lots of great tools and resources and program offerings. I wondered if I could jump in quick on some of the small business items, ask a couple of questions. And folks on the phone or on the webinar, please feel free to add to the chat if you have additional questions. I see a couple in there already. So you mentioned small business offerings are available for under 400 kilowatt peak demand. And I know that you mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it because that doesn't make sense completely to me. And so I wondered if you could tell people how they know if they're eligible and if they have over or under 400 kilowatt peak demand.
Yes, no, that is a great question, and it isn't the clearest or the most common everyday information maybe that most of us run into, but it is something that can be identified through just kind of your ComEd account. So whether it's your actual physical bill, or if you log into your ComEd account through the ComEd website, you can kind of find it through those details. But essentially what that means is at any point throughout the period of a month, if your demand meets or exceeds 400 kilowatts, then that tips you into that a larger business category. And if it stays below that threshold, then that keeps you within that small business definition. So it is something that can be found on your bill, but ultimately it's an easy question for us too. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I can find that information quickly for you and then help you identify which offering is best fit for that facility.
Wonderful. And then you mentioned too with the small business assessment that after you get your report back and you're looking at what projects to pursue, that there's some pre-applications with some of those items. Are those applications, does the contractor that you've hired, that's a ComEd trade ally, do they assist with those applications or kind of give you some direction or guidance on how that process works?
Yes, for sure. So yeah, the energy efficiency service providers that are within that closed network on the small business offering, part of being one of those exclusive, rock star contractors is that they are very well trained in the paperwork and application process. So they are a good source or a good resource for, helping with that process and making sure all of that is done properly, done correctly, and done timely as well. So there is a small business offering team as well that can provide additional support, but those EESPs within that network are well versed on how the program works and how all that application process works as well.
Great. Thanks, Brian. There's a couple of questions from the attendees. One is asking about kind of how ComEd programs that are funded kind of play well with other state and federal incentives. So, can they work together, basically?
Yes. Yes. The short answer, yes. The ComEd incentives never conflict with any other incentive offerings out there, whether it be federal, state, municipal, or through any other programs or anything. So you can always, they always play well together. They can always be combined. So no worries about taking advantage of any incentives offered through ComEd while also applying for any incentives either through state, federal, or more local municipality.
Great. And then we have a question from someone about getting the link for the 50% additional incentive program. So if you have that accessible, Brian, if you want to throw it in the chat, otherwise we'll also include it in some follow-up emails as well.
Yeah, I can probably find that really quickly and try to provide that link. And if nothing else, yeah, it'll definitely can be in a follow-up email also.
Great. I just have one more question, and then I think we can wrap it up. I just was curious how custom incentives get approved. Do you work with a contractor? Are you already working with a ComEd approved contractor, and then they're suggesting that this is a custom path, and kind of what the process looks like to get that through the finish line?
Yes, great question. So yeah, the custom offering or application process, it usually does start with your contractor. So if you have a project in mind that is a best fit for a custom incentive, working with that contractor to provide any information on what benefit or what energy savings will come of this new project. Oftentimes, the contractor you're working with has a lot of that information simply because it's a great selling point for a project about how it's going to improve, it's going to optimize operations and save energy. So they usually have a lot of that information available. That being said, we do have a robust team on our end, not only someone like myself, an outreach professional. We can help with either initial questions or at least kind of getting, kicking off that process. We also have a team of technical customer advocates on the custom team that can help get the calculations or any additional information needed to help the custom engineers calculate the energy savings and therefore the incentive. We have a team of professionals there as well. So definitely something that I will speak on as a great improvement and evolution on the custom offering that a handful of years ago maybe wasn't necessarily around and was a little bit more of a cumbersome process. Now we have a lot of people and resources in place to help make that process a lot simpler and a lot more streamlined.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. On behalf of the Building Energy Resource Hub and the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program, I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. Hope you got a lot out of this. Afterwards, we'll be following up with an email with the recording, with the slide deck, and the links that Brian has shared throughout the time today. We'll also send you a link to the past recordings from the 2 other series or webinars in this series, so you can go back and look if you missed those. We also have a survey in the chat, and we'll have a direct follow-up email with just the survey for you guys to give us your feedback on what more you'd like to hear at future webinars. So thank you again. Thank you again to Brian for joining us today, and we will see you next time.